First item is status of the golf course RFP. Madam President, you want to tee this up, please?
I'd be happy to. Thank you. Been thinking about all the golf course puns we could use today. So.
Okay. Okay.
And first, Mayor, I know that there was some news that came out on Friday. I wanted to congratulate you and to our new city administrator, Faye Johnson. Happy to have you here now without the interim title. So thank you so much. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
The golf course clearly is an important part of our community and in the South End. This is a project that has been, on our books and on our minds and as a part of conversation of our neighborhoods for many years. We've had multiple entities in the past year or two who have expressed interest in this site, including two who have not been able to come up with the necessary funding and financing for the site. So that being said, I understand that because of one of those, McGetrick, that PGA of America is also interested in the site, and the city's been working with them and some others who have shown interest in developing the golf course. What I'd like to do is to make sure that whatever project or proposal that comes up, that we don't see the same mistakes that we saw in the previous proposals. I want to make sure that citizen input is received, and I think that it is vitally important that we look at how the 8111 site plays into the mix. So today, with this being on the agenda, I'd like to confirm what is the timeline of any new conversations or developers that are looking at the site, as well as what are the next steps towards an RFP if that's necessary. And third, I'd like to confirm plans to seek community input at this stage of the process as well. So I look forward to staff's report on this.
Thank you. Mr. Greene, can you kind of give us the current status of where we are?
Certainly, Mayor. Again, I'll be very brief, but again, the redevelopment of the golf course is one of our 16 strategic priorities. As everyone is aware, we've had a team on place kind of working, representing the different departments. A quick chronology, I'm not going to go through all of the items, but as you may remember, back in February, there was a presentation made to the City Commission by 4 proposers. We had discussions with West Palm Beach Golf Links, and those did not realize the redevelopment proposal that we were able to move forward with. As Commissioner Lambert mentioned, we were dealing with McGetrick, and again, that did not move forward. So I'm simply going to highlight the items in green. So back in October, we had given McGetrick Golf Management an extension until November 18th to come up with funds for Phase 1, which was approximately $9 million to redevelop the course. There was another $9 million price tag for the construction of the clubhouse training facility and other amendments. So there were extensions granted. A few days before that extension was to hit, McGetrick brought in Seth Waugh, who is the CEO of PGA of America, the organizing body that runs PGA golf throughout the world. They expressed a potential interest in developing the municipal golf course, but again, they were just brought in late, so they had not done their due diligence or done any pro formas. On November 18th, McGetrick did not meet the deadline that we had given them for moving forward based on our October 18th letter. The commission discussed this at their meeting on November 25th. And then formally on December 3rd, we notified McGetrick that they will not be granted the additional 90-day extension they were seeking, and negotiations were terminated. We subsequently followed that up with a letter. So where we are right now is that we are no longer in the RFP process. The cone of silence has been lifted. I will tell you that I have been contacted by a lot of different folks who are still interested in developing the course. Topgolf continues to show interest. The Devasta folks, heard some conversations recently with a group called Falcone Group, Spot Built, who's interested in doing an entertainment facility with a hotel. So there's a lot of interest. So at this point, we're asking the commission, how would you like us to proceed? To Commissioner Lambert's point, I think whoever we have our next discussion with, we need to make sure that they are financially strong and able to do the deal. But at this point, we'll turn it back to the commission and we'll follow whatever direction you provide staff.
Thank you for that update. At some point, I'm not sure today is the day, commissioners, we will have to address the question of what are we willing to do to facilitate the funding or development of the course. Many of the proposals that have come to us have involved some redevelopment of the exterior portion of the course, which would require, that's obviously a purpose that is not golf. And so I don't know what the appetite is. But again, I'm not sure today is the day, but at some point we should have that discussion. Mr. Greene, have we heard back from Mr. Wall at all? I know he was over. I had a conversation with him before the end of the year. He was traveling to Australia, and he's the only one that I've heard from directly, and he had indicated a desire to kind of do some due diligence.
Exactly.
On the course.
He's looking for a period of time. I spoke to his attorney. They are interested in going through a due diligence period. So I think the interest is still there on their part. I will say that they have not done or reviewed. They asked McGetrick for their pro forma, so I don't believe they've conducted that analysis yet. So I think they want to do that. I will say that Topgolf calls me every couple weeks. They still have a strong interest. To the mayor's point, if a use like that goes in the southwest corner, there's a road that's going to have to be built that's going to go to that site. We'll have to look at what other improvements may be necessary, particularly at the Georgia-Forest Hill intersection. I think if you carved out a portion of that for residential, I think you'd have developers lining up to be involved in a project like that. So I think there'd be a lot of interest, but I think the PGA of America is still very, very interested in the project.
And I made it very clear in my conversation with Mr. Wall that while he's certainly free to kick the tires and undergo due diligence, it will not be exclusive. So now that the cone of silence has been lifted, the RFP has been terminated, others would be, I expected that others would be knocking on our doors with proposals, and he understood that. So, Madam President, did you have some further request or direction or
Sure, thank you.
suggestion for direction?
Thank you, and thank you for the timeline. I appreciate that of how we've gotten to where we are today. I think that a very important aspect of this for me is the community outreach. And while we are, lifted from the cone of silence, which I know was some concern before, what are we doing I want to take some time to talk about what we are doing to communicate with the residents. And I know that I've been working with Ms. Johnson on putting something together, and I presume that's why Mr. Fana is sitting at the table today as well. So if we could hear an update on that, that'd be great.
Good morning, Armando Fana, Assistant City Administrator. So yeah, we definitely intend to get community input on this project, and to the mayor's point, it's kind of hard to proceed unless we know what the appetite is in the community as well. But I also want to make a point that it's a South End location, but it's a community-wide asset, and so we want to intentionally make sure that we are getting input from the entire community, including voices that typically don't voice their opinion. And so we're going to have an intentional effort with that. We're getting some technology to help with that effort over the next month or so. We ordered some tablets that'll help us with some remote data gathering. But it's going to be an intentional effort over the next few months to gather data on what the community-wide interest is for that site.
Okay, great, thank you. And I just want to confirm that while we have this time without the cone of silence, that we're using it to gather that data.
And Commissioner, I can see us doing it two ways. So we get the community input, we get direction from the commission, and then we can go out and suggest, okay, here's what we want to do with the golf course. We want a par 72 golf course, so many yards. We want a residential component, or we don't want a residential component. And you lay out the factors that you want to see and have everybody submit. And as part of that, I would argue that we require some type of financial backing or some type of financial commitment so we can investigate to make sure that company that is making the proposal is financially strong. The second alternative would be to say, okay, give us your best proposal. That's kind of what we did with City Place back when City Place was first started. We went out to bid and said, okay, give us your best proposal. And we got a variety of different concerns as to how that 77-acre project would be developed. So you could do the same thing here. I don't know if the commission wants to go that direction, but you could simply go out and say, give us an idea of what you would like to see. And then you're going to get a more diverse, if you will, array of proposals coming in, but you could go either option.
Well, I think that what I like to see is some kind of community outreach and see what, as Mr. Fana says, the city would like to do with this city-owned asset to give us some direction. I'm not anxious to rush into another RFP at this point without getting some kind of, or having some kind of mechanism in place where we're able to hear from the citizens and maybe even weigh in on the question of, do we sell a portion of the golf course to fund this redevelopment, or people averse to that, whatever it is. And just so the commission knows, I don't know how public it is, I've asked Mr. Fana as Assistant City Administrator to head up a community engagement team that will help us as a city, as an administration, become more strategic as we engage, as we participate in community engagement efforts throughout the city. And he mentioned some software that's bringing to bear. There are representatives from the various departments that are working with this task force. And so that is why Mr. Fana will be taking the lead on whatever this community engagement effort will look like on behalf of the golf course. But I'd like to hear from the public and have them weigh in before we move toward another RFP or ITN or whatever we call it. Yes.
Just one thing to add, and that is, I think part of the engagement with the public needs to include the costs and the cost for maintaining a golf course and what that would mean fiscally. Because it's very easy to say, well, let's just maintain a golf course, but it's very expensive, and a lot of cities are struggling with that very issue. So we need to make sure that the public understands the fiscal ramifications.
Any other questions? Yes, Commissioner Neering.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a comment, which I believe we're all on one accord regarding this. For the 5 years that I've been on this commission, we have talked about this, and it just feels like we have not gotten any further in terms of what the decision is. And so I don't have the answers. What I'm saying is I can understand the frustration from our community members, as this has been a topic that we have talked about, and it seems like we continue to press reset on it. Again, there is no blame. It's just a matter of fact. And so in whatever we do, it is, and I don't speak for the commissioner or the mayor, but I would think we would want to in some way do our due diligence, but expedite it so that we can finally put a stake in the sand and move forward with whatever the decision is.
Commissioner Shove?
Thank you, Mayor. Along the lines that I think I've heard here today, it sounds like all along we've kind of followed the model of going out and saying, give us your best proposal. I would be in favor of what we're discussing today, going back out to the community, finding those priorities. Here are top 3, top 5, whatever they are, must-haves, and here are some like-to-haves, and then put that back out to the community, the development community, to say, here's what we're looking for. Show us this, and then if you feel like there's an upgrade in there, also put those in. And I think the second part of this is for this project as well as other projects, CRA projects and large city development projects, that if we could start to get some financial parameters around these RFPs before they go out, not only parameters of what we're looking to see in investment, but also the financial ability of those applicants. Because pictures look good on paper, but to Commissioner Neering's point, we keep cycling through some of these very, very important projects that are anchoring sites in our city that could be really great, but it's difficult. And I think the more that we can try to get that vetted out in the upfront, the better it will be for all of our community.
It's a very good point. Commissioner Peduzzi?
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with all the comments conveyed by my colleagues here this morning. I believe that we need to keep all of our options open. At the same time, we'd obviously like to move this thing forward. I don't want to lose sight, though, of the significance, I believe, significance of interest by PGA of America. This is something that they haven't done before. that they're willing to, potentially get involved in our city. This is the national organization that, could certainly bring a lot to our city. So I think we need to, to recognize that it is significant that they've shown an interest, but that we need to keep all of our options open, obviously.
No, that's a very good point, and obviously I would love to have someone of the nature and caliber as the PGA to invest in this particular project, but they are doing their due diligence and certainly entitled to do that. However, I don't want to put all my eggs in that particular basket, and I've made it pretty clear to Mr. Wall that there would be others coming down the pike. But I think it could not hurt for us to hear from the residents of the city as to what they would like to see in the course that will give us as a body some direction. Yes, Madam President.
Thank you. And just don't want to lose sight of the 8111 site in this community outreach as well. I think that site is a gateway-worthy site in our city for the South End, and I think that residents and the city are all looking for, what can we do there, whether it is in conjunction with this project or just at the same time. So, thank you.
Madam City Administrator?
Yes. Hold on, this thing.
Thank you, Ron.
Okay. Commissioner Lambert, you and I
Maybe
have
you're
talked
not.
about your planned meeting for February 8th, and I know that's going to be a larger community meeting. Are you okay with the outreach for the golf course being part of that meeting, or are you looking for a separate meeting?
No, I think that would be great. So what Ms. Johnson's referring to is I've been working with some of the neighborhood associations in the South End to come together as a group, similarly to what they do in the North End, to have a singular voice to say that, these are the issues that are important to us, and to hear from city staff on those as well. And Ms. Johnson and I talked about that this would be an optimal time to gather input from South End residents. To Mr. Fana's point, though, I do think that additional outreach might be warranted here if you're looking, as we're looking for additional citywide input. But I think that there'll be a number of residents from the South End there that day.
Well, I'm happy to have that as a part. I don't want, and I think Mr. Fana made this point, this is a city asset. And so I would like to have an opportunity for the city as a whole, or residents from throughout the city, weigh in on what they want their golf course to look like. So I don't want it limited to just South End participation. It could be part of a South End meeting, but I'd like to see a broader type of outreach effort. Mr. Fana?
Also, one of the ways that we're looking at providing or getting input from the community is not necessarily the traditional community meeting where folks just stand up and kind of give their opinion, because a lot of folks aren't comfortable doing that. So what we may do at that meeting is just provide the opportunities for how they can provide the input and not necessarily make it like a public forum to provide input, if you know what I mean. So, or it could be a mixture of both, but I'll get with you on that separately for that particular meeting.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Commissioner Schultz, did I see your hand up? Okay, do we have any other comments? So we got some clear direction? Okay. Thank you all very much.